Grizzlies are protected in the lower 48. So if you have to kill one and you go tell the authorities, who actually aren't authorities at all, they're generally dumb as a post city boys, you're going to get scrutinized. They're going to stick a microscope up your ass. And they're going to find any way they can to blame you for saving your life or saving the life of another innocent human at the cost of a grizzly bear's life. Because we all know grizzly bears are more valuable than humans these days, right? If you go turn yourself in, you're probably going to spend $100,000 on legal defense. You shoot the damn thing, you walk away. Try to avoid the fish and game cops and go about your business and have fun. Be a good citizen, help others.
Okay, so this is a brief excerpt from a video that was recently published by the owner of a U.S. ammunition company. Unsurprisingly, he spends most of the video sharing his thoughts on the best handgun calibers for self-defense in the backcountry, before sharing some controversial opinions and touching on some serious concerns shared by many. Specifically, what are your rights to self-defense in the backcountry, and are grizzlies really more important or valuable than people? Now, my first inclination was just to answer these questions myself. I've spent decades exploring grizzly country, had I don't know how many grizzly encounters, but then I realized that I could do one better. I sought out rangers, biologists, and officers from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Wyoming Game and Fish, Idaho Fish and Game, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. National Park Service in order to get you definitive answers regarding your rights to protect yourself in grizzly country. The goal is simple: have a constructive conversation that provides each of you concrete answers that you can take to the bank before your next trek into grizzly country. We're going to start with state wildlife managers before jumping headfirst into what federal authorities say about your rights to self-defense in the backcountry.
My name is Morgan Jacobson. I'm the Communication and Education Program Manager for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in southwestern Montana.
Dan Thompson. My official title is Supervisor of the Large Carnivore Section.
I'm Jeremiah Smith. I'm the Region 3 Grizzly Bear Management Specialist for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
So I've been within this Large Carnivore Section role since 2008.
We're in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, so that includes Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and 2 national parks, Yellowstone and Grand Teton.
We're a work unit within the Game and Fish Department whose focus is on black bears, grizzly bears, mountain lions, and wolves. We oversee all the monitoring and management of those species.
I've been working with bears since I was 19 years old. Just turned 50 the other day. And I've been fortunate to come up with a lot of the original bear managers in all 3 states during the recovery phase of grizzly bears. Definitely been dealing with bears for a very long time, both from a research capacity and from a management capacity. And spent a lot of time in the timber doing both.
I especially appreciate you calling me back when you were up on the mountain
Yeah.
on a 4-day trip. That was awesome. Can I ask, was that related to your work for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks?
Well, of course it was. All
Okay.
my backcountry ski trips are related to work. Part play, part work. The wintertime, definitely checking snowpack around the drainages.
Yeah.
Just keeping an eye on what's going on out there. Bears are funny critters, right? When they wake up, everybody's got 1,000 ideas of how and when they come out of dens, but the truth is we don't really know all of it, and it's a mix of factors. And so snow depth, daylight, all those things play a factor, but if you keep an eye on what the water's doing out there, it gives you a heads up on what the spring and the summer is going to be like for you as far as bears, food availability, all those things. So yeah, even us city boys tend to get out in the woods a little bit once in a while. We work together cross borders constantly. Cade Bolin out of Idaho, park guys and gals. So, I mean, we all talk with each other all the time. Hell, we spend half the time playing around together too. So we're pretty all in tune with what you're after here, I think. And it's not a rebuttal from us as an agency, because we can't afford to get into those types of fights. It just doesn't serve anybody any good at that point. I try not to get caught up in the politics of grizzly bears, whether it's local or afar. There's always lots of people that like to have their own opinion on what we do or how we do it or why we do it or the decisions that we make. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I try to stay out of that battle if I can, where we should be in the world of biology, which is unbiased.
So, given their protected status, there are many people who are concerned that grizzly bears are, quote, more valuable or important than people. As wildlife managers, how would you respond to people who have that concern?
Our primary priority is always human safety when it comes to these things.
Yeah, I mean, human safety is paramount above all else.
Fish and Game Montana has always had our number one goal in regards to, specifically grizzlies, but all wildlife is that, human safety is our number one priority. Always has been, always will be.
Even though we're trying to maintain this conservation success story that is the grizzly bear, at the end of the day, people come first, because if people can't tolerate them and people aren't safe, then it's kind of all for nothing.
That human safety comes along with a lot of education, because a lot of issues and problems with those types of animals can be solved just with a little bit of simple education.
Human safety and the well-being of wildlife in a lot of ways go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive by any means. And so when we're being safer as people in grizzly bear country or around any wildlife, it's most oftentimes better for wildlife as well. So, there's benefits on both sides, but human safety obviously is the top priority.
What rights do people have in the backcountry when it comes to defending themselves?
It's very simple. Whether it's in the backcountry or in your backyard, you have the right to protect yourself.
With both state and federal law, and not just grizzly bears, but any wildlife, you absolutely have the right to defend your life if it comes down to that.
It's been that way from the very beginning of the listing of the species.
People have absolutely every right to defend themselves if they feel threatened, regardless of what the animal is.
What is your process if somebody has a defensive shooting with a grizzly bear?
When it comes to grizzly bears, they are still federally threatened. Whether they're recovered or not on paper, they're still considered threatened. So we do a full investigation.
If you do end up having to kill a bear or lion in self-defense, by state law, you have to report that, especially when it comes to grizzly bears, because they are federally listed.
Any case of a shooting in self-defense will be investigated. We have a pretty good track record here in Idaho in the last few years of concluding that those were in self-defense and that there was no charges filed, but that's part of the process. Otherwise, anybody who shoots a bear could just claim self-defense, and that would be the end of it.
Whether it ends up being a wounded bear, a dead bear, a wounded person, or unfortunately a fatality, then the Fish and Wildlife Service investigates those. We as Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks are obviously first on the scene most of the time. We handle a large part of co-investigation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, but they make the ultimate decision on what happens or doesn't happen. So it's a pretty simple process. Again, not complicated in its nature.
Our utmost importance on any of these is safety for the people involved and our own crew going in there, right? We might have an injured bear, or we might have other bears in the vicinity. So it's very much a teamwork approach to get the information we need to listen to the person, to make sure they feel safe, and just so we can understand what's going on.
Have you ever had a case where someone was charged for shooting a grizzly bear in self-defense?
This is my 17th year in this position, and I can't think of one self-defense case that's ever been prosecuted.
Not on the investigations that I've been a part of. I have not. I know of some that have happened in other states.
These things are fairly, clear cut. Like I said, we have a long history of bear management in Idaho, and, typically resolutions that work for everybody.
We have to investigate them just to make sure, but it's not something that we're looking to go bust people for by any means.
There's this belief out there that if you shoot a bear, you're going to get put in jail, you're going to get fined heavily, you're going to do all these things. And as long as it's a legitimate self-defense situation, you're not. We're just happy you walked away safely.
In most of these situations that I've dealt with folks, they didn't want to get into a fight with a bear. They're in the woods and they just, stepped on a bear, and it happened so fast. It didn't matter what they had, if they had bear spray or firearms or both. A lot of times they just get hit that quick. And so again, at the end of the day, it's scary for everyone. And we're just trying to get in there and make sure folks are okay and figure out exactly what happened and go from there.
So on the topic of guns and bear spray, are these defensive tools competitors or rivals, or are they just part of a tool set?
To me, it's just tools in their toolbox.
I think they're part of a tool set. I don't think, everybody's different, right? Everybody's got their own opinion on what they should or shouldn't carry in the woods or to defend themselves.
I want people to have every tool available to help themselves in an aggressive bear encounter.
We recommend carrying bear spray, but when it comes to firearms, if you're competent with firearms and that's your choice to defend yourself, by all means.
We know how effective bear spray is, but we also know that people, if they're carrying a firearm, shouldn't have to drop it. So having more than one of those options available is something we very much support.
If you shoot and kill a grizzly bear, then yeah, you're not gonna get chewed on, hopefully. Sometimes the sound of a firearm will make a bear run off. They're dangerous and unpredictable animals, and you never know what they're gonna do in the situation. Really, the take-home message is just, be as prepared as you can be for those situations, and hopefully they don't happen.
So whether you're comfortable with a firearm, great, but use the firearm you're most proficient and comfortable using. We push bear spray too. We have a lot of folks that use it and use it effectively.
As an agency, as most agencies out there, they recommend carrying bear spray. There's a reason for that.
It's accessible and easy to use for everyone. It's easy to be proficient with it and carry it. It's affordable and it's effective when it's used properly. Because we have a default recommendation, people interpret that as, well, we're opposed to people carrying firearms, and it's not true. Like we mentioned, there are just multiple tools in the tool belt.
Most people aren't firearm savvy, and even the ones that are, maybe don't spend a lot of time shooting. And even if they do, as I mentioned earlier, some of these situations happen so quickly, it doesn't really matter what you actually have on you. You're already getting hit. We recommend bear spray from the simple fact that it's an easy tool for the average person to use and practice with.
A lot of our education efforts are to a general public audience, and not everybody is proficient or comfortable with firearms, but it is possible for everyone to be proficient and comfortable with bear spray.
In Montana, floating down the river on your boat, and we've had people that have gotten chewed up on river trips. And so again, just realizing that you're in grizzly country all the time and acting accordingly is really the key. It all comes down to carry the tools that you have and need that are necessary to get through the day, whether it's a first aid kit or a Leatherman or a pistol or bear spray, whatever you feel comfortable using. Make sure that you have it, it's readily accessible, and you practice with it day in and day out so that you're ready for that muscle memory to kick in if and when something like a defensive attack by anything, including grizzly bear, could happen.
We give out bear spray, hundreds of cans of bear spray annually, and show people how to use it, most importantly.
Yeah.
So we're obviously huge proponents of bear spray. But yeah, that doesn't have to be the debate. It's one or the other. I just soon have two on my belt.
Whatever people choose to do, it's important that they be prepared. That's what it all comes down to. Is it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Human safety is what's most important.
Have you ever been in a situation where you had to spray a bear in self-defense?
Well, the truth is I've sprayed a number of bears and been pretty lucky, to be honest with you. Again, it's all luck in the grand scheme of things, right? Depends on where it happens, when it happens, what's going on with the weather, all those things.
I don't want to jinx it, but I've had extremely close encounters with my bear spray pulled, ready to deploy, where the bear stopped on a charge on multiple occasions, but I actually haven't had to spray a bear yet. Yeah. But I've definitely had to be ready with it.
Several of my counterparts and folks I work with have sprayed bears with it.
I was on a goat hunt, and I ran into a subadult grizzly bear at about 9,200 feet. It was snowing heavily. It was windy, and the wind stopped. I was making noise and walking. I had a can of bear spray in each pocket, and I had my rifle slung because it was snowing heavy, and I had it covered up because I didn't want to get it snow in the barrel or anything else. And when the wind stopped, I yelled out, "Hey, bear," just like that, and probably about 30 yards in front of me, this snow pile blew up.
I do know one case where I think it was a warden used a whole can on a bear, and he did get a little bit on him. It was a female with cubs, and it stopped that attack, and he was able to still get out of there even though he got a little bit on him.
snow just went flying up in the air, and this brown mass comes jumping out of it. And I had hiking poles, and I threw my hiking poles, and I grabbed both cans, and he came running at me. And I sprayed one can, dumped the whole thing. He hit the brakes, yelled at me, screamed, swayed his head, and ran off. That was kind of it. It was quick. The only reason I was able to deploy that bear spray is because my hand was right down where my bear spray is. I was lucky enough to get my spray out and deploy it. The wind was stopped. It hadn't been blown in my face or blown in the opposite direction or anything like that.
Are you aware of any cases of bear spray failing?
Things can always happen, but I've never heard of a prior to expiration EPA certified bear spray failing.
We've had people deploy bear spray and still get hit. We've had people run, bears run through bear spray.
I know specifically of Todd Orr's case. I've spoken with Todd on a number of occasions and
Yep.
about his attack. Is there another attack where a bear charged all the way through the bear spray and actually attacked?
That was the one I was referencing.
Okay, that was the one.
Yep. Yeah, I know Todd too. That's just over the hill. That's in the same region in Montana that we're responsible for grizzly bear management. I think a lot of encounters that folks have with bears in regards to bear spray don't get reported. They think it's just business as usual.
I think there's some bears that maybe it doesn't affect near as much, but pretty much every case I can think of offhand, it's definitely stopped the bears in their tracks. I know of one case where a guy sprayed a bear, and in the instance of trying to get out of there, him and the bear kind of eventually circled back into each other, and he had to spray it again. It stopped the attack both times. I mean, it is a tool. It's got its limitations like everything else does, but it definitely works.
Are concerns over blowback a good reason to forego bear spray in grizzly country?
I have personal experience with blowbacks and accidental discharges from other people, of course.
If you're using it in the wind, you'll definitely get some blowback on you. One time I got bucked off a horse and landed on a can, and it blew up on me, and it took 3 or 4 hours for it really quit burning. But it does have a long-lasting effect, but it's kind of made to as well.
No, I've gotten bear spray in my face, in my lungs, in my hands, and it hurts like hell, but it was never enough to incapacitate me. And that's kind of what we tell people, that the goal is to get more on the bear than you. If you gotten it on yourself, you'll understand why it works.
So you would not advise people who are concerned about blowback to forego bear spray in the backcountry?
No, absolutely not. Try and understand, know where your wind is, things like that.
How do you balance human interests with the welfare of wildlife?
They're not mutually exclusive, right? We try to offer people all the necessary means to reduce conflict potential between them and grizzly bears and other wildlife that could be dangerous.
We really make it our mission to work with the public and to make sure we have good working relationships with all those folks, because that's the only way this thing works, is if we're all working together towards a common goal.
Folks in Montana have been living around grizzlies a very long time. Living in town, subdivisions, you name it, everybody lives around grizzly bears in one spot or another, whether it's in a high density or a low density.
The crew guys I work with, I think we're in the field far more than we're ever in the office. And we work with a lot of different stakeholders. I mean, we definitely have disagreements with folks. I wouldn't say we're all on the same page all the time, but at the same time, I can't think of really anyone I work with that I don't have a good working relationship with. And even the guys in Idaho and Montana that I know they really go out of their way to try and resolve conflict when it happens. We take that stuff really, really serious, because we know the consequences of what happens when you don't deal with it.
When you talk about individual bears and these encounters, and people get pretty upset when bears get removed for conflict reasons and management reasons, it's important to remember, too, that we're managing bears as a population. In order for bears to maintain on the landscape, tolerance is the key, as with anything.
It's more about providing the education, the tools, and not limiting people to what they can do to prevent themselves from getting in a bad encounter. In our situation, we're very active with the public and with people that live, work, and recreate in grizzly bear country, so we have a pretty decent working relationship with people. We want people to let us know what's going on.
Grizzly bears and people in close proximity is complicated. And so trying to maintain that buffer, that distance, bears in the woods, bears in wild spaces, that's really the key for a long-term recovery of grizzly bears and maintaining a viable population on the landscape.
At the end of the day, like when it comes down to for livestock producers, for instance, we deal with a lot of livestock loss, and I want to make sure that those landowners and those producers are still profitable at the end of the year. In Wyoming, we have a payment program that pays them for livestock losses, and we take that very serious.
As far as our education efforts are concerned, that's our goal, is to help people be more comfortable, be more aware and prepared, so that they can continue to enjoy these places. Just because there's bears in these places doesn't mean that people should stay home in any sense. There's too much fun to be had in some of these places for people to miss out on that. But being prepared is really important.
Let's say somebody shoots a grizzly bear in self-defense. Is it productive or self-serving to then neglect to report that incident to wildlife managers?
I would basically flip that around and just basically say if they're in a situation where they killed a grizzly bear in Idaho in self-defense, they need to report it to Fish and Game. If they advise people to break the law, then the person who breaks the law will still have to deal with the consequences of that. If there is a self-defense shooting, then they need to report it.
A lot of these things take place in remote areas. Some of them are in your backyards, but a lot of these take place in the wilderness. A lot of these take place in remote backcountry. And so getting our staff and personnel into these areas to even begin an investigation is complicated in and of itself. And then once we're there on the ground, specifically if it's a bear that's been shot and killed is one thing, but when you have a wounded animal running around, it's pretty sketchy. I'll be honest with you. I've been on a bunch of them.
First of all, make sure you get out safely. Don't stick around. Get in touch with somebody from Game and Fish. In Wyoming, get in touch with us. We'll get in touch with the Fish and Wildlife Service and just let us know what happened. I mean, we have to be thinking, is there a potential human safety threat to others in the vicinity if it's a wounded bear? Again, we just want to know about it so we can investigate and make sure we're doing what's right for the people involved.
It's a lot of safety issues with our own personnel in these situations, but it's also what we get paid to do. It's our job to go in and figure these things out.
We are required to determine what happened to the fate of that individual bear, but that's all part of the overall demonstration of this recovered population we have, right?
We can maintain a high level of human safety and still have grizzly bears on the landscape.
Our number one goal is human safety. And so, first thing we're always making sure is that whoever's involved in these types of incidents are okay.
We want people to let us know what's going on, including if they have to take a bear in self-defense. People are very good about reporting those. We have a system in place to deal with that. So this notion that hiding it is good is just, it's not the case. There does need to be false narratives that we're out to get people. We're really not. We just want people to be safe.
In the course of this project, I spoke to 7 representatives of both state and federal wildlife agencies, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who directed me to state wildlife management because, as discussed, they are often the first on scene and do make recommendations to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Eventually, when grizzly bears are delisted and no longer considered threatened, the entire investigative process will then pass to state wildlife managers, with one exception: national parks. National parks like Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and Glacier are home to substantial grizzly bear populations, which will remain under the stewardship of the National Park Service, which by law afford all wild animals on park lands, including grizzlies, their greatest protections on the continent. And while every wildlife management organization in the United States strongly recommends carrying bear spray when in grizzly country, the National Park Service places particular emphasis on the use of this highly effective defensive tool. As of 2010, it is lawful to carry firearms in U.S. national parks, so long as you are in compliance with all other state and federal laws. However, discharging a firearm in any U.S. national park remains strictly prohibited. For that reason, I took these exact same questions to rangers and biologists with the National Park Service. And like those in state wildlife management agencies, I found officials from the National Park Service that were ready and willing to have this critically important conversation. Their process is, however, a little more involved, and I was told that it would take a few extra weeks to get around to answering my questions. And quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure how recent layoffs at federal agencies like the National Park Service may affect that timeline. So make sure to stay tuned for the follow-up to this video, where I will share the National Park Service's response to the exact same questions that I pose to state wildlife managers. Now, what I can tell you, based on my previous communication with Park Service biologists, is that at least in Yellowstone National Park, bear attacks have been at an all-time low for decades, averaging just one attack per year since the early 1980s. That's in spite of the fact that the grizzly bear population in greater Yellowstone has grown fivefold in the last 45 years. The point is, we know how to stay safe around grizzlies. State and federal wildlife managers are proactively trying to educate the public and prevent conflicts. But whether you're hiking the Grand Canyon, floating rivers, mountain biking behind your house, or exploring grizzly country, the responsibility for your safety ultimately falls to you. Make sure that you have the appropriate tool set and the necessary skills to either prevent or respond to any possible backcountry emergencies. Take it from someone who's been exploring grizzly country for decades and has had dozens upon dozens of grizzly encounters, some at extremely close range. Wildlife managers can't babysit backcountry visitors. They can only try and make sure that you have access to the knowledge and tools that you need to keep yourself safe. I wholeheartedly subscribe to the classic American school of thought that no government agency or official should be beyond scrutiny or criticism, but I also feel like criticism should be based on the facts. And that is where the internet, in a general sense, is sabotaging all of us. In the internet age, anyone can sit down in front of a camera and share their opinions for 20 minutes, before then releasing those opinions into cyberspace where accuracy rarely enters the equation. Internet algorithms rank information based on transitory metrics of, quote, engagement. And most of the time, the more outrageous, inflammatory, and absurd the opinions, the better content performs online. And consequently, total bull has all but taken over the internet space, and it's placing people in harm's way. It's true, some individuals have been charged for unnecessarily shooting a grizzly bear. You don't get to shoot them because they have sharp teeth and long claws. However, if your life is in danger, you are fully justified in protecting yourself and the other people around you. In my experience, there is nothing unreasonable about what Morgan, Daniel, Jeremiah, Roger, and Luke have shared here. I informed them regarding the video and claims that inspired this project, but as they've said, they're not looking to rebut parties or individuals, and they fully accept that people are going to share their opinions. The point of my video is to provide you authoritative answers regarding your rights to self-defense in grizzly country. And I'm grateful for the good-natured and professional way that our state and federal wildlife managers have participated in that discussion. We all agree that human welfare comes first, but that doesn't mean that we can't also allow space on the landscape for large predators like grizzly bears. If you plan to explore bear country, make sure to take advantage of both state and federal bear safety resources, and contact wildlife managers in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho for free training on how to use bear spray. If you choose to carry a firearm for self-defense in the backcountry, then make sure that you are responsible and sufficiently proficient with your chosen defensive tools. And for instant access to future installments of my Cut the Crap Guide to Bear Safety, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, before we wrap up, I want to share one final thought. For just a moment, let's examine the popular internet advice that you should, quote, avoid the fish and game cops if you shoot a grizzly bear in self-defense. While it's true that a dead bear itself doesn't represent a danger to people, aggressive grizzlies are often wounded and not killed outright in defensive shootings. And as you've heard today, wounded grizzlies represent a significant threat to human safety. And even if you kill an aggressive bear, other bears and large predators are certain to scavenge and even guard the carcass, creating a hazardous set of circumstances for people who may enter the area afterwards. So beyond the legal considerations, if you truly value human safety, then whether you use a firearm or bear spray to defend yourself against an aggressive bear, make sure that you contact wildlife managers so that they can evaluate any potential risks to human safety. I want to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members. Your support of At Home in Wild Spaces is giving the facts a fighting chance. Creating truly reliable content is much more difficult than just sharing opinions with a camera. If you value trustworthy content and haven't joined the Wild Spaces community yet, please consider scrolling down beneath this video and clicking join, or heading over to Patreon. And if a monthly subscription isn't your thing but you appreciated this video, please consider making a one-time donation to At Home in Wild Spaces by clicking the thanks button below this video. Until next time, this is Mike echoing the good advice given at the onset of this video. Help others and be good citizens, which includes cooperating with wildlife managers.